Picture this, if you can. It's a Tuesday, gray skies, the kind of rain that chills you to the bone, and I'm burying my mother. The woman who taught me how to read the wind and listen to the forest. By Friday, before the dirt has even settled on her grave, I drive back to the property and hear a sound that makes my stomach turn. It wasn't the birds, it wasn't the creek. It was the mechanical, grinding shriek of a bulldozer ripping through a hardwood forest that my great-grandfather, Silas Thorne, planted with his own hands back in 1885. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a whoops, wrong address situation. The president of the Homeowners Association next door, let's call her Victoria St. Clair, pulls up in her pristine white Mercedes G-Wagon, window rolling down with that smooth, expensive hum, smirking at me. She waves a construction permit in my face like it's a golden ticket from Willy Wonka. 12 luxury villas, a $4 million project, sitting right on top of my heritage. My land. Now, most people in this situation, they'd call the cops immediately. They'd scream, they'd get an injunction, they'd stand in front of the excavators like a frantic protester. I didn't. I did the exact opposite. I let Victoria and her crew pour every single foundation. I watched them frame every wall, install every piece of imported Italian marble, and dig the infinity pools until the project was 95% complete. And only then, when the paint was drying, did I walk into a courtroom with a deed older than the ink on her birth certificate and take it all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to absolutely dismantle someone who thought they were untouchable? Not by yelling, but by waiting? If yes, hit that like button, because you're going to love this. My name is Caleb Thorne. I'm 47, a cartographer. I make maps for a living. My ex-wife used to say I was glacially slow to react to anything. She wasn't wrong. I'm methodical. I measure twice, cut once. But when someone tries to steal your legacy, sometimes patience isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon. The land in question is 18 acres of pristine wilderness in the Blue Ridge Mountains, just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. It's not just dirt. It has water rights, timber worth 6 figures, and a history that runs through my veins. My grandfather tapped the maples here. My dad kept apiaries near the ridge. It was a sanctuary. When Mom passed in April, she left it all to me. No siblings, no debts, just the land. I spent 2 weeks in Ohio settling her estate. Funeral Tuesday, paperwork until Thursday. I drove back to North Carolina late Friday, exhausted, expecting silence. Instead, I got diesel fumes. The smell hit me a mile out. Thick, oily. Then the backup alarms. Beep, beep, beep. I pulled my truck onto the gravel access road, and my jaw hit the steering wheel. Orange fencing everywhere. They had fenced off nearly 8 acres of the southeast quadrant. 2 massive excavators were tearing up the earth, and concrete trucks were spinning. I saw fresh slabs, 4 of them already curing in the mountain air. A sign posted on the fence read, Summit View Estates, Phase 2, Luxury Mountain Living. I parked, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice. A foreman in a neon vest, let's call him Mike Kowalski, walked up. He looked tired. Help you, buddy, he asked. This is my land, I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. He squinted, looking at his clipboard. No, sir. This is permitted Summit View development. You got a problem, you talk to the HOA. That's when Victoria St. Clair arrived. She was in her early 50s, wearing designer athleisure that cost more than my entire wardrobe, oversized sunglasses, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was the queen bee of Summit View Estates, the subdivision that had popped up next door like a fungus about 3 years prior. She looked me up and down like I was a piece of trash stuck to her shoe. Can I help you? She asked, her voice dripping with fake politeness. You're building on Thorne family land, I told her. My family has owned this since 1885. She didn't even blink. I think you're confused, sweetie. Our legal team acquired this parcel through a tax lien foreclosure last fall. It's all done. If you have issues, come to the board meeting next month. She handed me a glossy brochure featuring digital renderings of glass houses and infinity pools, printed over photos of the very trees she had just cut down. Then she rolled up her window and drove off. I stood there, watching her taillights fade, holding that brochure. A tax lien foreclosure? That was impossible. Mom was obsessive about bills. I went inside my empty house, opened my laptop, and pulled up the county registry. Parcel 14-009. Owner, Caleb Thorne. Date recorded, April 15th, just 10 days ago when the will cleared. No sales. No liens. No transfers. My coffee went cold as I stared at the screen. Outside, the generator hummed. Victoria had lied to my face. The foreclosure didn't exist. She had forged something, somewhere, and she was banking on me being too grieving or too stupid to figure it out. That night, sitting in the dark, listening to the creak, I made a choice. If Victoria wanted to play games with property lines, I would let her. I would let her dig her own grave, dollar by dollar. The next morning, I went into full surveyor mode. I didn't yell at the workers. I took photos. GPS tagged every corner, every stake, every violation. I went to the county courthouse and met with a clerk named Brenda, a woman who looked like she had seen everything. She pulled the physical deed. 1885, updated 1957, transferred to you. Brenda confirmed, adjusting her glasses. Clean title. So how did they get a permit? I asked. Brenda shrugged. If they submit a title report that looks real, we issue the permit. We don't verify ownership, honey. That's for civil court. And there it was. The loophole. The government doesn't check if you own the land. They check if you claim to own it on the right form. I sent an email to the Summit View board that afternoon. Professional. Attached my deed. Demanded they stop. 12 hours later, Victoria replied. Not the board, just her. And she CC'd her lawyer, a guy named Preston Sterling. The email was condescending. Mr. Thorne, our records show Lot 47B was acquired via tax lien. Surveying errors happen in the mountains. We are proceeding. Lot 47B. I've mapped this entire county. There is no Lot 47B. She was fabricating parcel numbers now. She was gaslighting me. Days turned into weeks. Construction ramped up. My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, showed me a post from the private Summit View Facebook group. Victoria had posted, Alert, a hostile individual is claiming our expansion is illegal. Our lawyers have confirmed we are in the right. Please report suspicious activity. Suspicious activity? I was walking on my own property. I needed more firepower. I went to the one person who knew the history of this valley better than anyone, Mrs. Higgins. She's 80 years old, sharp as a tack, and runs the local historical society from her basement. When I told her what was happening, she grinned. Caleb, your great-granddaddy sold timber rights to my family in the 1920s, she said, rummaging through a box that smelled of cedar and old paper. She pulled out a map from 1894. Look here. She pointed to a dotted line cutting right across what was now the main entrance to Summit View Estates. That's a logging easement, she whispered. Never vacated. Legally, you have a right-of-way through their front gate. Actually, you could block their front gate if you wanted to. Mrs. Higgins had just handed me a nuclear launch code. But I wasn't ready to push the button yet. I needed them to commit. I needed the money to be spent. Then, the first crack in their armor appeared. I was at a gas station, buying coffee, when Mike Kowalski, the foreman, tapped me on the shoulder. He looked nervous. You're Caleb, right? He asked, glancing at the door. Look, man. Victoria's checks are bouncing. My guys are getting restless. And I saw your deed. If this goes south, when I win, I interrupted him, I'll make sure your crew gets paid. But I need you to keep building. Don't stop. Mike looked at me crazy, but he nodded. She's pre-sold 6 of these units, Caleb. Nearly $1 million a pop. If this stops, she's destroyed. Good, I said. By week 5, the walls were going up. I sat on my porch, drinking bourbon, watching the structures rise on my land. Every nail driven was evidence. Every concrete pour was an asset I would eventually claim. Victoria St. Clair drove past my house in her white SUV, refusing to look at me. She thought she was building a fortune. She didn't realize she was building it for me. The psychological warfare began in week 6. Victoria knew she was standing on quicksand, so she tried to throw money at the problem. A courier arrived at my doorstep with a thick, creamy envelope embossed with the logo of Sterling and Associates. Inside was a settlement offer. They wanted to buy the disputed adjacent strip of land for $85,000. It came with a non-disclosure agreement so tight I wouldn't be able to tell my own dog about it. $85,000? The timber alone was worth that. The land was worth $500,000. And the audacity to call it an adjacent strip when they had built 12 luxury villas entirely on my side of the property line? It was insulting. I replied with one sentence. I decline your offer to purchase land I already own. My lawyer, an old family friend named Arthur Vance, laughed when he saw it. Arthur is the kind of lawyer who operates out of a strip mall office filled with stacks of books, but he's a shark. Caleb, he said, leaning back in his creaky chair, this is where it gets fun. In North Carolina, we have a statute regarding accession. If someone improves your land in bad faith, meaning they knew or should have known they didn't own it, you don't just get the land back. You get the improvements. The villas, the pool, the clubhouse, all of it. I don't want 12 villas, Arthur, I said. I want my forest back. You can't unpour concrete, son, Arthur replied grimly. But you can make sure the person who poured it never does this again. Let her finish. Let her hang herself. So we waited. But Victoria didn't like the silence. She went to the press. The local paper, the Mountain Gazette, ran a front-page story. Local homeowner blocks affordable housing expansion. She spun a tale about being a single mother. She was married, fighting a greedy, recluse landowner, me, who was trying to extort the community. It worked. I started getting glares at the grocery store. Someone egged my mailbox. But I stayed quiet. I didn't rant on Facebook. I didn't call the editor. Instead, I installed 6 high-definition trail cameras in the woods surrounding the construction site. Week 8 brought the escalation I was fearing. 2 a.m. A loud hiss woke me up, followed by the sound of glass shattering. I ran outside in my boots and boxers. All 4 tires on my truck were slashed. My windshield was smashed in. Spray painted across the hood in red letters. Drop it. I stood there in the dark, smelling the aerosol paint, feeling a cold knot of fear. This wasn't a legal dispute anymore. It was dangerous. I called the sheriff, filed a report, but without a suspect, there wasn't much they could do. Or so they thought. I pulled the SD cards from my trail cameras the next morning. And there it was. Timestamp, 1:47 a.m. A white Mercedes idles on the access road. The passenger door opens. A stocky man in a baseball cap gets out holding a knife and a spray can. The motion sensor light hits his face. It was Victoria's brother-in-law, a guy named Travis. I didn't release the footage. I saved it, burned it to 3 different hard drives. I was building a dossier that would bury them. While Victoria was playing thug, her financial house of cards was collapsing. Mike Kowalski, the foreman, met me at a diner off the highway. He slid a folder across the table. It's a Ponzi scheme, Caleb, Mike whispered. She took out a $4 million construction loan from Pinnacle Trust. But she also pre-sold the units to private buyers. She's using the pre-sale deposits to pay the loan interest and pocketing the difference. She's double-dipped. If construction stops, the bank calls the loan, and she goes to prison for fraud. Does she know that you know? I asked. No, but the crew is ready to walk. She owes us 3 weeks of back pay. Tell them to hold on, I said, sliding an envelope with $10,000 cash across the table, my savings. Keep working. Finish the roofs. Seal the windows. Make them perfect. By week 12, the project was 95% done. It looked beautiful. Landscaping was in. The clubhouse was painted a tasteful slate gray. It was a monument to greed, and it was sitting entirely on my property. Then, Mrs. Higgins found the smoking gun. She had FOIA requested the county tax documents Victoria used to get the permit. She called me over, her hands trembling. Look at the notary stamp, she said. The tax lien foreclosure affidavit was notarized by Richard St. Clair, Victoria's husband. He's an accountant, not a lawyer, I said. It's worse, Mrs. Higgins said. The parcel number listed? 14-009B. That doesn't exist. They invented a fake subparcel to attach a fake tax debt to, so they could fake a foreclosure. It's forgery, Caleb. Felony fraud. We had her. We had the deed, the surveyor's report, the fake affidavit, the video of the vandalism, and the testimony of the unpaid foreman. Arthur looked at the pile of evidence on his desk and smiled like a wolf. It's time to drop the hammer. We filed on a Monday. A quiet title suit, combined with claims for trespass, fraud, and conversion. We also sent a notification to Pinnacle Trust informing them that their collateral, the villas, was built on stolen land. The bank froze Victoria's accounts within 24 hours. The construction site went silent. Victoria called me that night. Her voice wasn't smug anymore. It was shrill. Caleb, let's be adults. I can give you 3 of the villas. You can sell them for $2 million. Just sign a waiver. I don't want the villas, Victoria, I said, my voice dead calm. I want you to explain to the court why you forged a foreclosure document using your husband's stamp. There was a long silence. Then the line went dead. 2 days later, she went on TV again, crying fake tears, accusing me of destroying a community project. But the narrative was shifting. The internet sleuths had found the court filings. A TikTok video comparing her tearful interview with my documented proof went viral. Hashtag HOA horror story was trending. But Victoria wasn't done. She had one card left to play. Her lawyer, Preston Sterling, filed a counterclaim accusing me of forging my 1885 deed. They hired a handwriting expert who claimed my great-grandfather's signature looked suspicious. It was desperate. It was pathetic. And it led us to the day that changed everything. The court hearing. The courtroom was packed. It felt less like a civil hearing and more like a murder trial. The local news had cameras set up in the back. Victoria St. Clair sat at the defense table, looking pale and diminished. Her expensive blonde highlights looked brittle under the fluorescent lights. Preston Sterling, her lawyer, was sweating. On our side, it was me, Arthur Vance, Mrs. Higgins, and a group of 5 victims. People like Sarah Jenkins, a nurse who had sunk her life savings into a pre-sale villa that she now realized she didn't own. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Holloway, stared at the defense table over her reading glasses. Mr. Sterling, she said, you are claiming Mr. Thorne's deed is invalid based on what exactly? Sterling stood up, adjusting his tie. Ambiguity, Your Honor. And we have a witness regarding the foreclosure. Call your witness, the judge said. They called Richard St. Clair, Victoria's husband. This was their Hail Mary. They needed him to lie and say the foreclosure was real. Richard walked to the stand. He looked like a man marching to the gallows. He wouldn't make eye contact with his wife. Sterling asked the questions. Mr. St. Clair, did you notarize the document in question? Richard took a deep breath. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. No, Richard said quietly. Sterling froze. Excuse me. I did not, Richard said, louder this time. He looked at Victoria, and for the first time, I saw pure heartbreak in a man's eyes. My wife used my stamp without my knowledge. I didn't know about the fraud until the subpoena arrived. Victoria gasped audibly. Sterling looked like he wanted to vomit. Arthur stood up. Cross-examination? Actually, never mind. No questions. The dominoes fell fast after that. Mike Kowalski took the stand and testified about the unpaid wages and the instruction to ignore property lines. Sarah Jenkins testified about the fake title insurance she was sold. Then, Arthur put me on the stand. Mr. Thorne, he asked, what do you want? I looked at Victoria. She was crying now, real tears this time. She knew it was over. I didn't want any of this, I said. I wanted to keep my mother's land wild. But since that's impossible now, I want the land back. And under North Carolina law, I want the improvements. Not to sell, not for profit, but because they are on my dirt. Judge Holloway didn't take long. She ruled from the bench. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The foreclosure affidavit is declared fraudulent and void. Mr. Thorne is awarded clear title to the land and all structures thereon under the doctrine of accession. Furthermore, I am referring Mrs. St. Clair and Mr. Sterling to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation regarding forgery and fraud. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Deputies moved in. They arrested Victoria St. Clair right there in the courtroom for contempt and flight risk. As they let her out in handcuffs, she looked at me. There was no anger left, just shock. She had built a kingdom on lies, and it had crumbled in an afternoon. But the story doesn't end with her going to jail. It ends with what happened to the villas. I stood on the deck of the clubhouse a month later. It was legally mine now, a $4 million asset. I could have sold it, moved to Fiji, and lived like a king. But that felt wrong. That was Victoria's way. Instead, I partnered with a local veterans charity. We turned 6 of the villas into transitional housing for homeless veterans. Guys who had fought for this country and ended up sleeping in their cars. I met a guy named David, a former Marine. He was the first resident of Villa 1. He shook my hand, his grip like iron. You saved my life, man, he said. No, I told him. You earned this. We sold 3 of the units to a land trust to fund the operation, ensuring the remaining forest would be protected forever. The last 3 units? Affordable rentals for teachers and nurses like Sarah, giving them a place to live in a town that had priced them out. Victoria got 4 years in federal prison. Her husband divorced her. The HOA collapsed and was reformed by decent neighbors. So here we are. I'm still a cartographer. I still live in my modest house. But now, when I look out the window, I don't see an enemy. I see families. I see veterans rebuilding their lives. I see justice. It makes me wonder, though, is justice about punishing the bad guy? Or is it about fixing what they broke? I think I know the answer. But I'd love to hear what you think. Was I right to take the villas? Or should I have bulldozed them to return the land to nature? Let me know in the comments. And remember, sometimes the best way to win a war is to sit back, wait, and let your enemy build your victory for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the map. Stay safe out there.